Jake Paul's California mansion has been raided by the FBI, multiple news organizations report. You can see in this aerial footage agents in uniform outside his home in Calabasas.
When names like Anthony Joshua are mentioned, they represent more than a single moment or event. They represent the idea of what happens when controlled environments vanish and a fighter is forced to face someone who cannot be negotiated with, scripted around, or protected by clauses. Because true elite competition exposes gaps that marketing can never permanently conceal.
Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts for an incident that he's known for being in the public eye. But today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
The volatility of this narrative is what keeps audiences locked in, because every accusation leads to another clip, another interview, another denial, and another breakdown. It creates a feedback loop where doubt becomes entertainment and controversy itself turns into the product, driving attention, engagement, and non-stop debate across MMA and boxing media. From a pure AVD perspective, this story works because it blends fear, scandal, authority figures, and unresolved questions, pulling viewers forward with the promise that the next revelation might finally confirm what they already suspect or completely flip the narrative they thought they understood.
Right, because of the weight differences, the weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. For me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, of the weight difference, and Joshua is a former champion, and also he's current, he's active, and this is going to be the first time that we see Paul fighting an active fighter. We seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, it's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional.
At its core, this is not only about Jake Paul as an individual, but about a wider cultural tension between traditional combat sports values and influencer-era promotion, where control, virality, and optics sometimes overpower the brutal honesty that once defined fighting at the highest level. Whether Jake Paul can fully escape this cloud of credibility depends not on speeches or clapbacks, but on choices. If future fights prioritize risk over safety, transparency over control, and competition over spectacle, perception can shift. But if the same patterns repeat, the audience will decide that the illusion, once cracked, was never truly real.
Couple of hours, there's been some reports about an apparent leaked script. Have you seen this?
Move on. If people think that he's going to do a quick two-step and do this, and this, I hope he just goes out and takes his head clean off with the first punch and lets him know who Tommy Fury actually is. There's one interview, and I'm going to name it now, Lyndon Arthur, absolute fantastic, that man. I don't read that much on social media because it's all bullshit, but Lyndon Arthur, thank you very much. From me to you, you said something about Tommy being a proper fighter, can really punch, one of the hardest punches he's been in. Now for Lyndon Arthur to go and say that, Lyndon Arthur's a proper hard, tough man, we all know that. So Lyndon, respect, thank you.
The moment the conversation around Jake Paul truly shifted was not tied to a single punch or a single night, but to a collective realization among boxing and MMA fans that spectacle, branding, and selective matchmaking had gradually replaced competitive purity. When names like Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Oscar de la Hoya, Dana White, and Michael Bisping entered the discussion, the sports audience began framing Paul less as a fighter and more as a symbol of an engineered era where narratives are marketed harder than merit.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, there was a point where, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that violence war thing between us, after he slapped me, I wanted to, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
In combat sports history, Real reckonings are rarely clean or cinematic, and Speaker One's narrative lives inside that gray space where public perception, whispered skepticism, and years of online debate collide. Jake Paul's rise was never just about wins and losses, but about how those wins were packaged, explained, defended, and amplified until fans began questioning whether they were watching competition or content dressed up as combat. When accusations of rigged fights surfaced, they did not appear in a vacuum. Fighters like Deontay Wilder openly questioned the legitimacy of Paul's bouts. Oscar de la Hoya echoed long-held insider concerns, and even casual viewers noticed patterns involving glove sizes, round lengths, opponent selection, and promotional control that felt closer to exhibitions than traditional professional boxing.
Are you on performance-enhancing drugs?
If taking Viagra counts, then yes.
I'm gonna need a yes or a no.
No.
That's true.
Lucky you.
Dr. Stuart Fisher, author of The Little Book of Big Emergencies, became part of the discussion as the narrative intensified after Jake Paul himself admitted to easing off during certain moments. A statement that, in isolation, might sound like sportsmanship, but in context ignited skepticism. In elite boxing, fighters are not expected to manage danger for their opponents. When that admission spread online, it reinforced the belief that some fights were paced for optics rather than settled by pure competitive necessity. Drug testing became another accelerant, as Dana White's public challenge was framed not as gossip, but as a demand for transparency from someone claiming legitimacy. The absence of publicly released, independently verified results allowed critics to connect physical changes, resistance to strict anti-doping clauses, and insider commentary into a narrative that refused to fade.
Publicly stated that I use cocaine. I do not. So I told you, you could randomly cocaine test me for the next 10 years. I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids. So I want to randomly steroid test you for the next 2 years. And that thing that you came out with today, nobody on earth thinks that you really wrote that. You're too stupid.
Social media breakdowns and commentary from figures like Dylan Dennis added fuel to the fire, not because accusations alone prove guilt, but because the accumulation of voices created an environment where denial felt weaker than disclosure. Every refusal to provide documentation became, in the eyes of fans, another unanswered question added to an already crowded ledger. Promotional responses from MVP executives leaned heavily on legal language and defamation warnings. While common in high-stakes business, those tactics often backfire in fight culture, where transparency earns respect and legal threats signal that image protection has taken priority over open accountability.
That I brought it up wants to do testing, and he wants to do a set date before the fight. Okay, so he did the cycle, he did whatever, and now he's going to try to take a piss test and clear it and be like, oh, I'm clean. That doesn't count. Okay, it doesn't count. With the money that he has, you can have a doctor clean your system in over 24 hours. Cheeto Vera just went on that podcast and said, you know that. So him doing this is another scam that he does. He's a bullshit artist. He just lies. Everybody knows he's on juice. He's admitted taking peptides. There's doctors that have him in the office saying we're giving him peptides on their website. So like, it's just bullshit. And I don't even care about the steroids thing. It's just like, what are we doing here? He has every advantage. He gets to pick the refs. He gets to pick the fucking judge. It's like
Dylan Dennis, who has his own contentious history with Jake Paul, posted photos and commentary that reignited debate. Michael Bisping's critique cut deeper precisely because it was calm and experienced, noting that Jake Paul's opponents were often retired, aging, or celebrity adjacent. The single bout against a peer-level boxer, Tommy Fury, resulted in defeat, a fact that anchors critics who argue that legitimacy cannot be claimed without repeatedly facing prime, hungry professionals.
There has never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake.
The FBI raid narrative added another layer to public perception, because even when charges are dropped or incidents remain unresolved, repeated proximity to controversy shapes belief. In the fight world, where reputation matters as much as record, each headline compounds a sense that chaos follows Paul wherever spectacle is being monetized.
Being in the public eye, but today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
Speaker One's underlying argument is not that every fight was fake or every accusation true, but that the architecture surrounding Jake Paul's boxing career appears meticulously engineered. From opponent selection to promotional framing, the environment has made fans feel guided toward believing in authenticity without being shown the evidence that usually earns it. Legal processes may take time, but healing does not follow court timelines. Grief moves unpredictably, and no ruling can restore what was lost or rewind the moment everything changed. Gerald Miller's emotional response highlights how rivalry dissolves in the face of mortality, reminding fans that clicks, comments, and outrage can intensify real pain. Voices like Johnny Nelson urge restraint, emphasizing that behind every update is a person navigating the unimaginable. Anthony Joshua's future in boxing will always be debated, but his future as a man carrying loss matters more. Eddie Hearn's stance feels less like management and more like guardianship, while Tyson Fury's reaction reflects someone who understands how quickly triumph can become disaster. Duke McKenzie and Johnny Nelson represent experience over hype, criticizing Jake Paul from concern for the sport itself. Survival, when paired with loss, can feel like punishment, reshaping identity overnight. For Jake Paul, association with recklessness and tragedy may define perception more than any verdict. What unsettles fans most is how celebration turned into mourning, exposing how thin the line is between victory and devastation. Carl Fraka's frustration echoes boxing's struggle between legacy and spectacle, forcing uncomfortable questions about how far entertainment can go before it collides with reality in irreversible ways.